Welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I am an Episcopal priest. I live here in Austin, Texas, and I've had the gift of recovery since December the 27th of 1972. Starting to get the hang of this thing. It's been a long, long road. The purpose of these podcasts is to go a little bit deeper into the history and the spirituality and the psychology of 12-step recovery for folks who are interested in going a little deeper into those things, and try to get guests who bring some expertise in various areas along those lines, and have them share that information with us. So if you have not done so, I would encourage you to visit our website. It is titled Two-Way Prayer, TWO. And on it, you will find some videos and things, instructions on how to do a prayer practice that they used to do in the early days of AA, and came from the Oxford group. I think it's one of the missing pieces, that along with the four absolutes. My goal in life is to kind of get the word out there to people in recovery that while we left some things behind, and they probably needed to be left behind, we left a couple of real pieces of gold. And I think these can be really helpful, life changer for me. And I'm in touch with a lot of people around the world, and that's been their response as well, that they wish they'd had this a long time ago. And also want to thank our donors who kind of keep the lights on here. Really appreciate that. If you want to make a gift, easiest way is just go to the website and hit the donate button over there. We are starting a new series, and I'm excited about it because I get to visit with an old friend here, and the subject is going to be on recovery writing. And that is also the title of my guest's book, Recovery Writing, Discovery and Healing in the 12 Steps. And newly published. My friend is Dr. James Ryan, and James himself is in long-term recovery from addiction. He's active in 12-step fellowships. He's married and the proud father of two. And by way of background, he'll get into this a little bit more deeply, but after working for some years in the addiction treatment field, James returned to school, earned his PhD at the University of Wisconsin at Madison, where my son-in-law went to school. They do good work up there. And he did that with the intent of teaching college-level writing, which he is now happily doing in Alaska, but he does keep a lot of sweaters and coats on and things of that nature. And James, welcome to the podcast. It is really, really good to have you here.
Likewise. Thanks for having me on, Bill.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I just want to give a little teaser. It's going to be a while before we get into the writing per se. Mm-hmm. But I mean, what struck me is this is something that really goes deep with you. It was there. It wasn't like you're born with it, and then we get into addiction and we lose track of who we are. Mm-hmm. And many of us are fortunate enough. I mean, it's like me. I get my pathology and my theology. They got real twisted for me when I was growing up, But I was a kid, and while other kids were out playing football, I was playing mass. So, I mean, I'm really sick in that regard, But it just took me like I was in my 50s before I was mature enough. But it was a missing piece of my life. Yeah. And I had to go back, and I had run away from it and wasn't mature enough to do it. And that's the thing that strikes me about you and your life story, that you knew this about yourself, that writing was important, and you took the diversion into addiction, and then recovery. But then you knew to really become James Ryan, you needed to do the writing.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right that I don't know if I was born with it or born into it, but it definitely was a part of my early life, and has been a sort of a complicated relationship throughout my entire life, in and out of addiction, before addiction, after addiction, in sobriety and recovery. there's sort of a developing relationship with writing that's been going on the whole
Yeah,
time.
I'm going to dig into that. It's an interesting subject. Doesn't get covered very much, so I'm looking forward to this. So tell me about your early life, and then
Sure.
a little bit about the addiction, how that came about.
I mean, there's when you tell a life story, there's a billion things you leave out and certain few things you include. And so I'll try to include the things that are most relevant to the writing and to the addiction and the recovery.
Perfect.
Early life, I think that there's a little story that my folks tell about me is that pretty early on, I said something to them to the effect of, when I grow up, I'm going to be a real writer, not like you guys.
So they had a writing background, both of them?
Yeah, right. This is a number of things to unpack in that statement. One of them was that they were both writers. They were both educated people. Our house was full of bookshelves, full of books. They read to themselves and to each other and to me and my
Mm.
brother as kids. It was a literate household where reading, there was a high value placed on reading and a high value placed on writing. They wrote books and Bible studies and articles. My dad was a college professor who later then went back to seminary and became a pastor. And my mom was a registered nurse who sort of opened her own practice as a therapist. And so these were educated people who sort of imparted that the value of that education and the value of literacy on us as kids. The other piece of that is that because they valued that, they also liked to see it in us and in their kids. So anytime that I did something creative, that was praised in my house. So if I drew a picture, it was praised and put on the refrigerator. And when I started to learn to write and would come home with little stories or sentences or jokes or whatever, those were always praised too. And sometimes went on the fridge or got saved. There's still some of the
Sure.
early stuff. And it was this is really good and you're really good. You're so creative, you're a smart person and you're so good at this, you're so talented. So that kind of really strong reward for that in my family. And this existed in a kind of a counterpoint to the systemic shame and religious trauma that our family was also carrying, right? Both of my folks came from pretty strict conservative religious environments. And they were carrying a lot of trauma with them in a sort of a way where they just were sort of, in my early life, they were kind of holding on tightly to that and
Hmm.
holding on tightly to their feelings, and didn't have access to they hadn't processed that yet. That sort of came later in their lives. So there was a kind of an emotional emptiness where the trauma was being kept quiet, but it was sort of there. I don't know how to explain that exactly, but there's this
Yeah.
sort of feeling in the
Hmm.
thing. And then when my dad went back to seminary and then became a pastor, we started going regularly to pretty conservative churches where there was the theology was, it was a Baptist church where my dad worked, and the vibe was that you're a bad person. That's probably
Right.
you're bad, and
Baptists and Catholics,
yeah,
we're kind of primed for addiction, I think.
we have the shame, right? We have
Shame
the
is,
shame.
yeah, well, loaded with it. Got it.
Yes. So I had lots of that, lots of like, you're so bad that you deserve to be, burned forever.
Hmm.
And you're lucky that God did this thing with his kid or whatever. I don't have to get too deep into the theology of it right now,
No,
but the
we'll
shame was there.
save that for another series.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So there was a lot of reasons to feel really bad about myself, but there were also these set of counterpoints of like, when I do something creative, then I'm good. Then I feel good, and
Mhm.
I'm told that I'm good.
Right.
So I think that's a pretty good recipe for a guy who wants to keep writing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
When we get into high school and junior high, the sort of the shame and the writing continue, and they sort of take on a new form. When puberty hits, all of a sudden I've got all these new thoughts and feelings that are proof of how bad that I am, and I can't share those with anybody. It's not safe to
Right.
just be a kid going through puberty. But writing is a place where I can express them. Writing is a place where I can sort of be a little more genuine in a way that even if I feel really bad about having these things, I can at least put them somewhere, right? And get them outside of myself
Mm-hmm.
and reflect on them a bit. And I can create them into
Mm-hmm.
stories and stuff. So the writing there becomes kind of a lifesaver, like a pressure release, but also it becomes really vulnerable. I have this sort of record of
Yeah.
the real terrible me.
Right.
No, I can't ever show to anybody. And so I no longer want praise for that. I just want to keep it secret and quiet, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, but on the other hand, there's also a real desire for other people to say that I'm a good writer still, right? There's still that ego is like, I want that reward still. I want that counterpoint.
Right.
So there's times when those two things converge. I remember there was a time in high school where we wrote stories for one of our English classes, and there was the option to read it out loud to the rest of the class. And I wrote this piece about having dinner with my grandparents, my dad's parents, who were in probably the most conservative. You could call it a cult. I think it'd be fair to call it. It's very, very, very conservative,
Mm-hmm.
small religious group.
Mm-hmm.
And going out to dinner with them was always an experience of like the shame that was in my immediate family system was like it got thicker. The air was thicker with it. It was like going to the source.
Yeah.
And those dinners were always about me dissociating. And so the story was sort of going out to dinner and sort of the banal things you do when you go out to dinner with your grandparents. And then them saying a few shaming things and me staring into my spoon, looking at the reflection of the ceiling fan and like completely zoning out, right? So it's a pretty raw story and it expressed something very core to who I was, not the kind of thing I would ever want to share with anybody. And the plan was
Mm-hmm.
not to share it, to read it out loud to class. But
Yeah.
there was a girl I had a crush on, and she wanted to see my story. And so I shared it with her, and she was like, "Wow, this is so good. You need to read this to everybody." I was like, "No way am I ever going to do that." And she said, "Well, then I'll read it to them."
Oh my gosh.
And
Okay.
she kept it, and then she read it out loud, which was on one hand totally humiliating and mortifying.
Yeah.
On the other hand, was like a huge ego stroke because this girl that I was totally crushing out on thought that my story was good enough to share with the world, right? So there were a few moments like that where that like secret life escaped enough and got praise in the world where it's really confirmed that this was going to be a part of who I am. This is an answer for me to all the other stuff that I'm experiencing. Addiction doesn't come into the picture until a little later
Hmm.
after I've dropped out of high school, actually. And the way that happens is at the same time that I'm going through all this stuff and becoming a different kind of a writer, I'm also a young evangelical who is trying to convert his Mormon friends to evangelical Christianity. I'd gone to summer camp, the church summer camp every year, and one year it was a guy who talked about sharing Christ with your Mormon friends, and it just happened that my peer group was largely Mormon guys, and
Where'd you grow up, James?
Southern California, and so we
Southern
went to
California. Okay.
yeah we
All
went
right.
to a church camp called Lake Hume. I think it was called Hume Lake
Uh-huh.
Summer Camp. This guy was like a mime. He did this weird mime routine and then told us that our Mormon friends were going to hell and we needed to save them. And I completely bought into it to the point where I became pretty annoying in my peer group. We would sort of have, religious debates, but then I would also tease them about being Mormon
Mm.
to the point where it got to this point where um, this was high school. Southern California, so everything's kind of outside. The hallways are outside and the eating spaces are outside. Everybody has lunch in this big central courtyard where there's a tree in the middle. My peer group ate lunch right next to that tree, right in the middle. And I'm teasing my friends about being Mormon, kind of being a jerk. And the ringleader of our group turns to me and he says, "Shut the F up, James," like as loud as he possibly can. And it's echoing down the hallways and everybody gets quiet. 2,000 kids in this high school are all staring at me. And I just spiral inward
Mm.
and am shocked, but go home that night and think and like have this like the ego is starting to crack, or
Yes.
the maybe it's the persona, I don't know, but it's this like
Right.
this self that was built up around this is falling apart. The questions that come are like, well, why am I doing this? Why was I so mean to them?
Right.
And why do I think that I have something that they need? There's no real rhyme or reason why they need to come to my side or I need to come to theirs. It was just sort of socialized into me.
Hmm.
And that's really all I had to go on. So that's sort of like first peek behind the ideology. Leads to a bunch of other questioning, like of school and of capitalism and of all kinds of things start to
Yeah.
fall into question. And then I started dropping out of stuff. I dropped out of church and I dropped out of high school. And I decided I was going to hitchhike around the country and find a better way to live, hook up with
Hmm.
some commune somewhere or something
Yeah.
where people were living a more a different kind of life. And I did make some kind of a venture in that direction, but I did not find the perfect commune that I was looking for.
You should have checked notes with me. I'd been
Oh, did
down
you?
that trail before, so I checked
Yeah.
out the communes.
Oh, you could have given me some tips. Yeah.
I could have, yeah, bad ones, but
Yeah, right, right. I ended up, in camping out in tent cities in Santa Cruz, and then going to Earth First gatherings in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, and
hmm.
kind of around the country a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, enough to end up with this feeling of like the thing that I'm looking for is not out there. So I came back home and decided that I would look for it in the inner world, and the way to do that was to start taking LSD.
Yeah.
And I took it I had read The Doors of Perception by Aldous
Yes.
Huxley. I'd
Sure.
read about peyote cults and stuff.
Hmm.
And I sort of had this idea that if I get into this stuff, it'll show me something new about the world that I can't get any other way. And I mean, it turned out to be true. It's definitely,
There is a world in there. There really is, especially
yeah.
for an introvert, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Because it does do a number on I'm able to be more social in a different way with other
Hmm.
people who are in that world,
Right.
but also it unlocks all kinds of things in your inner life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And maybe
Uh,
I'm not ready to have them unlocked.
no, right. It also
Yeah.
unlocks a certain level of psychosis in me that,
Which I think really lies inside anybody. You got
yeah.
to be
Yeah.
careful with this stuff.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not
You know?
recommending it.
No, no, no. I hear you. I hear you. I hear
Yeah.
you. But just a warning.
Yeah,
The inner world has its attractions, but it has its dangers too.
that's
And
true. Yeah.
much like religion. I mean, somebody said, I don't know where the quote came. Maybe you can help me track it down someday.
Yeah.
The only thing more dangerous than religion is no religion.
Hmm.
And it's there's a danger to this stuff,
Hmm.
but there's a danger to not having it as well.
Yeah.
Because it does provide some structure for us, which is really helpful. But if
Hmm.
it's the wrong kind of structure, too much structure, then it's a trap.
Right.
So anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Another series, James. We'll
No,
go
yeah, I
down that
relate to
road.
that. No, that's ringing all kinds of bells in me. The idea
Yeah,
of like,
yeah,
at this point in my life, I was definitely a no religion guy.
yeah.
And there was a lot of dangers that went along with that.
Hmm.
Um, I'd just gotten out of the dangers of a certain kind of religion, and
Yes.
there's other dangers of another kind of religion ahead.
The pendulum swung
Yeah, that's
all the
right.
way over. Yeah,
That's
We're
right.
extremists. We
Yeah,
addicts seem to be extremists.
yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
We like extreme experiences, and you
Hmm.
get those from extreme ways of being, right?
Right, right. Yeah.
So the acid came along, the weed came along after that. That did unlock psychosis in me. I
Hmm.
did have I was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic. I went to it was 5150 is what they call it in California. You're a danger to yourself and others, so you have to be
Hmm.
locked up. My folks were told that I was just going to be schizophrenic for the rest of my life. They're going to have to take care of me.
You're about what, 19, 20 at this age, or what?
Yeah, 18, 19,
Yeah.
somewhere in there.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it happened pretty fast. Drop out of high
Yeah.
school, start
Hmm.
dropping acid, and I'm in the nut ward pretty quick. And then that came along with pills from the doctor. So then I'm, if you tell, you learn to tell the right thing to the psychiatrist, and you get the kind of feeling that you want out of the meds.
Right.
So I went that route too.
Hmm.
And writing was kind of a part of that time, in the extent that it became a kind of an excuse. There's sort of a mystique or like a myth about writers that, great writers need to have out of the box experiences, and sometimes they need to drink or get high in order to fuel their creativity. I told myself that. I told myself, I'm a writer having experiences.
I'm like Hemingway,
Yeah,
huh?
that's right.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. Not which, to be fair, not really a great role model either.
No. Right.
But the reality was that I could barely get a word on the page.
Mm.
I would say, I'm going out. I had this chair set up in my parents' garage, and I'd say, I'm going out to the garage to write. And I would take my notebook, and that was where I had my stash, and I would get loaded. And then I was lucky if I could even put the
Get a
pen on the
word.
paper after that. Yeah. But I'm writing. I'm a writer, right? And,
Yeah, that's
it's
it.
important.
Cool.
That led to, I had to go to rehab. My parents made a pretty clear ultimatum with me that it had to be one where they couldn't do this anymore. It
Hmm.
was going to be one way or the other, and I chose to go into rehab. And that sort of precipitated a period of sobriety that lasted about 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Well, I mean, it's a little bit
Kind
of
of.
exaggeration. Off and on for 5 years, I should say.
Okay. All right.
But it also is a sort of a dry period of my life
Yeah.
where I'm sometimes in meetings, I'm sometimes not, I'm
So you're
sometimes
doing
drinking.
12 step. You're on the 12-step
Yeah,
route? Okay.
yeah,
Gotcha. Got
right.
it. Good. Okay.
But not in any way of like actually working the steps, but
No,
sort
no,
of
no,
like
no. You're hanging
showing up in
around.
the meetings and
Hanging around. Yeah, yeah,
look,
yeah.
you read them off the wall and you sort of say, oh yeah,
That's
yeah,
it. Got it.
I understand those things, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I could write them better, but
Yeah. Wow, you really pushed a button there.
another
Absolutely.
series.
That's right. Yeah. So, and in this period, there's a kind of a growing desperation in me. Like,
Mm,
uh, before I was, restless and screwed up, but I had drugs to kind of take the edge off, right?
right.
Um, it took the edge off and replaced it with psychosis, so not great. But now I just have this sort of emptiness inside and a kind of itchy feeling in my skull, and like I'm never quite comfortable in my own skin, and I don't
Yes.
have anything to make it relax. I don't have anything to turn that off. And that over time, it gets worse, not better.
Yes.
Uh, and I ended up in a place where I wasn't getting high anymore, but the voices that I used to hear when I did get high, they were starting to show back up again. And the paranoid delusions that I used to have, even though I wasn't getting high anymore, they were showing back up again. And I started to get very anxious and very preoccupied and weirder, weirder and weirder. And at the same time, I had sort of decided that the way to solve this problem, if I wasn't going to get high, the way to make my life meaningful was to become a great writer. And I thought that a kind of literary fame would make all this suffering worthwhile. This is another myth of writing, is that
You you didn't aim to be a mediocre writer.
no, you have to be the great one. You have to be at
Okay.
the top.
Understood.
You have to
Understood.
be like Hemingway again, right? You have to
Yes.
be famous.
That's
You have to
right.
be,
Okay.
everybody has to praise your writing, just like my mom did and my dad did. Everybody
Right.
now has to praise my writing.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's not enough for the family to praise it. It's not enough for one cute
No,
girl
no,
in high
no.
school that I have a crush on. Now it has to be the whole world, right?
You want your work on everybody's refrigerator.
That's right. And that really was how I felt was like the only way that I'm going to feel okay. is
Okay.
because nothing else is fixing it. Going to therapy isn't fixing it. And going to
Right.
meetings isn't fixing it. And just journaling isn't fixing it. I used to
Right.
sit for long hours and write about my ideas about what was wrong with me and trying to figure it out. And figuring it out wasn't working.
Right.
So the only thing I had going was that I could kind of do some writing. And if I could do that well enough, then everybody in the world would love me. And then I'd be okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
that didn't pan out.
Right. No?
uh, and I ended up in a pretty bleak spot. I was living out in Western Maine, going to a creative writing program in a school, and was starting to think about maybe it's better not to be alive anymore.
Hmm.
And that's the point at which I met the guy who would become my sponsor, and fell in with a big book AA meeting.
Hmm.
Because that was his home group. He invited me to it, and I was surprised, actually. When I first went into this meeting, I was surprised. I hadn't ever been to this kind of a 12-step group before. I usually go to ones where everybody talked. Usually there might be a speaker, or we might take turns talking, but it was all kind of verbal. Here, what they were doing was they would read out of the big book. So they were reading.
Hmm.
And then they would share about the kinds of what happened to them when they did what it said. And that included writing. So like as a writer, my ears perked up. As
Yeah.
books, my ears perked up, and this was like a different format or something. But on top of that, like they're you could just sort of tell from these people that they were okay in a way that I was not.
Hmm.
Their inner being was at peace in a way that mine was not.
Hmm.
And in a way that was a little bit shocking to me. I wasn't used to addicts who were okay on the inside. I didn't identify with that. I identified with addicts who were all scratchy and, crazy. That's the kind of, if I go to a meeting and everybody's like that, I go, okay, I belong.
Yeah. This is, I know this territory.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
me.
I
That's
don't know
me.
the other territory.
Right. This other
Right.
territory is weird.
But
They're okay.
I know, this is the interesting.
Yeah.
I know that they knew the other territory.
Yes. And
That's very important.
that's part of what was so shocking,
Yeah,
right? Is
exactly.
that they could describe in incredible detail
Right.
their lives before doing the stuff they were doing.
That's right.
And it was exactly how I felt on the inside.
Yeah.
And just in the way that they described it and in the quality of their presence, you could tell they were not in that place anymore.
Right.
And they attributed it to reading this book, doing what it says, and then doing some writing exercises.
Mm.
And I thought, that's bonkers. Like that, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. They also used the word God a lot, which put me off. And like, I dropped out of church. I had reasons for not ever wanting to go back there.
Hmm.
That was kind of a red light warning for me.
Sure.
But I went in anyway because they were okay and I was not.
Right.
Um, and I did the stuff that they did. I worked with my sponsor. He showed me through the book. We got up to a third step, which was this kind of big moment of surrender. I had a kind of an intense experience with that. And part of it, the part of that relates to writing was I knew that I couldn't go on writing the way I was writing. I couldn't relate to writing as a guy who wanted to be on everybody's refrigerator. That wasn't gonna, like, that ego that I built up had to be
Yeah.
abandoned. And that meant in practical terms, that meant I had to like take on this mentality of like, I may never write again, right?
Hmm.
The surrender here is like, I may have to jettison that whole part of my life. And I'm willing to do that in order to take on this healing, right?
Because you knew there was a falseness to it, and
Yes.
yet at the same time, there was a truth to it. You're
Yeah.
balancing those two. This
Hmm.
is good. This is good.
Yeah. In the moment of that surrender, I don't think I understood the balance.
No, 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 no.
I think I just understood I have to let this go,
Right.
you know?
That's right.
And then the balance comes in later.
Hmm.
Actually, the balance is still something I struggle with today.
When you get there, give me a call.
Yeah. But in that moment, it was like, okay, I'm abandoning this. I'll let it go because I need. There is a kind of a price of entry to this way of life, and it's
Yes, there is. Very
you
much
don't
so.
know what it's going to be.
Right.
But for me, it was this. I was so tied up in the writing, so tied up in that ego that was the cost.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then immediately we turned around and had a writing project, which was the fourth step.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And this looked like it was right out of the big book. So, if anybody's familiar with that, you write columns of things. And the first set of things was a resentment inventory. I was supposed to make a list of people I resented, people, places, and things. And the way different people have different ways of doing this. Is a sort of broad range of ideas about what a big book inventory is supposed to look like. My sponsor said, go home and pray. And what you're going to do is you're just going to ask that God will show you the things that are separating you from God and from other people. And then you're going to write down whatever names come to mind. You're not going to censor this list too much. You're not going to self-edit if something pops up.
I wish more sponsors went that way.
Oh, I do too.
To seek the guidance.
Yes.
Get that you show me the stuff that needs to go. It's very different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this
instead of like answer these 600 questions.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's a different approach.
It's a very different approach. It's focused on really the goal here. And this was told to me in the meetings, was told to me by the sponsor, that this was a group that really emphasized this, which is if your ideas could fix you, you'd be fine.
Exactly.
So we need something radically different. We need to somehow tap into some insight or some wisdom that's beyond you. And
that's right.
The sponsor said, I can't give it to you.
Right.
Meeting can't give it to you. Your brain can't give it to you.
Exactly.
So you gotta open something else up and let something new happen inside you. Right.
And to me, that's the meaning of unmanageable.
That's right. Right. I can't manage it.
I can't manage it. I need to be under new management.
Right. Right. Which is a scary proposition, actually.
Damn right it is.
You don't know what's going to happen as a result of that.
Right. Exactly.
And you don't know how to do it.
No.
I don't have any experience with because in a way you can't do it. Right. It's just sort of this, you get into this weird, paradoxical territory of I'm trying to do this thing where I don't do anything. And somehow that's going to make my life work.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make logical sense. It's hard to explain.
Right.
But the first exercise with that, you're supposed to live your whole life this way, but the first exercise is, okay, here's your resentments. Let's see if we can do something with that.
Yeah.
Right. So pray, write down the names that come. Then describe the reasons you resent them. Then talk about a little bit about what they did affected you. Then comes column 4, and column 4 is kind of a twist on things. It says that instead of talking about the other person and what they did, we now have to look at our failings. And I was told you're supposed to look for where have you been selfish, where you've been self-seeking, where have you been dishonest, where have you been afraid in each of these relationships.
Yeah.
Right. That was a real struggle for me. It was hard for me to see that. I had also this other ego of I'm a really nice guy. I'm the good guy who is wrongly treated by everybody. And I'm nice. I'm a nice guy who's taken advantage of. So when you sit me down and say, where have you been selfish in relationship to this resentment? I draw a blank. It doesn't compute, and I really, really struggle with that. So again, my sponsor said, well, you need to sort of isolate yourself with this piece of paper and pray. Because again, the ideas that you can come up with are obviously you're not coming up with any ideas, but even if you could, those aren't going to be enough. So you really need to open up to hearing an answer from someplace deeper.
That's right.
So I did that. There was a sort of at this college I was going to, in the library basement, there were these cubicles that had no windows, and you would kind of lock yourself in. It was just the desk and the paper and you, right? And I did that and I sat with my inventory, and it was some I don't know, it was resentment against somebody, and I could not see why I was selfish. And so I would just start praying like, I can't see this. I don't think this is going to work. Is there anything you can show me about this? I don't even know if you're out there or if you're real.
Yeah. All right.
But I'm here and I'm waiting for some kind of thing to happen, right? And I would sit and I would wait, and then a really quiet voice would emerge and just suddenly suggest something like, well, didn't you lie about that one thing? Or, didn't you hurt that person like this? There would just be this little whisper of like insight.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I accepted that, it was like this flood of like insights would come following from that.
Right.
I would write the first one down, and then another one would follow it, and then another one would follow it, and I would just keep writing, and I got all of a sudden this whole different picture of myself emerged, right? Whole different picture of this relationship,
Right.
which was not about me being a nice guy and being taken advantage of.
Yeah.
But, oh, I'm complicit in all kinds of stuff, and I've really, it's interesting. I've thought about this. Like, for a guy who grew up with all this shame, you would think that either A, I'd be really good at seeing all my faults, but I wasn't. Or B, like this would be even worse for me because I would be like more shamed by this. But interestingly, I was not good at seeing my faults. But when they did come, when I did listen, it wasn't more shaming. It was liberating in a way.
Absolutely.
That's hard. It was hard. It's hard to explain that, but
Yeah.
I think on paper people look at that sometimes and think, oh, this is going to be bad for people with lots of shame. But the opposite was true for me.
And there was a voice, James, that was
Yeah.
guiding you in a sense.
Yes.
Maybe you didn't have that language. I didn't have that language, but I'm tracking with your experience.
Yeah.
A part of me that was closed off, but definitely not the ego part of me that I'm so used to.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. The ego part of me was the guy sitting with my arms crossed, looking at my paper like, I'm not selfish. This is stupid.
That's right.
How is this supposed to help anybody? Okay,
That's
fine.
right.
Show me something. Yeah, that's the guy that's like, right?
That's right. And if you want your inventory taken, come see me because I'm really good at that.
That's right. Yeah, I'm ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
I've been keeping score for a long time, and I'm going.
Hey, you got it. You got it. Yeah.
So it really was something else.
Okay.
That started to speak in that basement, right? It really was a little whisper of some other kind of insight. And what happened was the things that would come up, I would immediately recognize them as like, this is obviously true. And it's more true than what I was able to see about myself so far.
I'm gonna interject some Oxford group stuff and early.
Here we go. Yeah.
A luminous thought.
Yep.
There's a light around it. That's what I'm hearing you say. So whatever this thought was, and I don't care what it was,
right?
The way I'm receiving it is, ooh.
Right.
Ooh.
Yeah. There's a recognition that sort of reverberates throughout every part of me.
Right.
It's like
a good drink. That's that element. It's
exactly right. I think that's a really good comparison because what comes with a good drink is
yeah.
And what comes with this, I mean, it's a bit of a punch in the gut to see yourself for what you've done, but it comes with this incredible relief.
I don't have to be who I've been pretending to be. What a relief that is.
Yes, that's exactly right.
What a relief.
I don't have to put up the lie anymore.
Right.
Which is a lot of work. It's a lot of work to put up.
Tell me. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So and the lie, when the lie pops, then all the tension around it goes away.
Yep. You feel it in the body.
You feel it in the body, and you recognize it immediately as true, and immediately as healing, and immediately as helpful, and more true than I could have seen for myself.
That's right.
And so, I didn't believe in God a minute ago, but whoa, what's this? Right.
But I've had an experience of something.
Yeah.
One of the things I think we've lost in 12-step, and this is what I got from the literature, this whole thing was an experiment.
Yeah.
Take the steps as an experiment. So you're in the laboratory
Yeah.
And now, James, you're having an experience of something. You
Yeah.
may not have the words for it, but something's bubbling in your test tube.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Your
And
little
I'm getting
burn
evidence.
is having
Yeah.
some results.
Yeah. That is actually how I was described to me, that like, you don't have to believe anything. You can bring all your doubts to the table,
Right.
but do this thing, see what happens to you.
Mhm.
And if it's real, then you'll get the evidence in your own experience. Right.
Exactly.
And that is exactly what happened. I got evidence in I can't deny that happened to me.
Hmm.
Right. I can't make rational sense of it either. Like, to
Right.
this day, it's still just kind of a shocking when this happens. It's like, what? How
That's the
it's,
way the ego is going to experience it.
yeah, totally upset.
Anytime the ego experiences the greater self,
Mhm.
it comes as a bit of a defeat,
Yep.
you know?
Yep. Yeah.
Not that it's put down, but it's
Mhm.
humbled.
Yeah, that's right.
It's
Right sized,
humbled.
maybe.
What
Yeah.
right sized, which is, I mean, and that's what recovery, internal recovery is about. It's getting that ego to be right sized,
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
not to go away, or you wind up psychotic. You're back,
That's
back.
true.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
It's got to be
true.
right sized.
Yeah. And kind of continually, that's always, because it inflates. Mine, I don't know about you, but mine just blows up like a balloon all the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was talking to somebody the other day. It's the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know, he gets destroyed,
Yeah.
and then all of these stuff is laying on the ground. But then,
Yeah.
like Mercury, comes
Mm-hmm.
back together,
Mm-hmm.
reconfigures, and there he is again.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
welcome to 12-step recovery.
Yeah, we're never done. We're
Yeah.
never done.
But this is so important if you can appreciate. That's why I'm glad we're spending some time on some of these things, because they're extremely important. They're hard to verbalize,
Hmm.
but yet they are what is happening internally
Yes.
in recovery,
Right.
in good recovery.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm tracking with you 100%.
Okay. Yeah.
And 100% that this is the circumstances change, but that
Hmm.
doesn't matter.
Hmm.
What's going on inside is the same.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, we'll get into this, I think, maybe in the future, but when I
Hmm.
look at different kinds of recovery writing, and when I see it being effective,
Right.
I keep hearing the same core to it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because
Which is
it's the same problem.
right.
I mean,
Right.
it's separation and it's joining.
Yeah.
Separation, going off,
Hmm.
ego alone, disconnected,
Hmm.
isolated,
Hmm.
relying on a substance or something
Yeah.
to make it at all sustainable. And thank God for that, because it keeps you alive at least,
Right.
until
Right.
you're ready for the other. But the other is a joining,
Yeah, it's a point of contact, right?
point of
Something's coming
contact.
through.
Yeah.
Something's coming through.
Connection.
Yeah.
Step
Yeah.
11,
Yeah.
conscious contact, conscious connection.
May already always be unconsciously connected, right?
Yeah,
And I think we are.
I do too.
And then this is when you sit down. I think there's a billion ways to do this, but recovery writing is one way. And this inventory was my introduction. Was
Mhm.
like, I cannot find an answer. I have to open up and be ready for some kind of other answer to come. And then the connection that's there, boop, comes up into
That's right.
consciousness, right?
That's right.
It
That's
comes
right.
up.
The
Yeah.
great reality is within.
Right. And then it
Last
reveals
place you'd
itself.
ever think of looking.
Right.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was looking for it out there in a commune. I was looking for it in the
Fix
LSD,
me,
looking
fix me,
for it in
fix
the
me.
become a great writer or whatever. No,
Hmm.
it's not in any of those places.
No.
It's in the openness to something else.
And there's a uniqueness there. I'm gonna piss off
Yeah.
a few 12-step
Yeah.
people. I love doing that. I love it, because we always say, wow, you're terminally unique.
All
But
right.
this,
All right.
and I know what they mean by that, and
Yeah.
there's truth to that. But there's an untruth to it.
Mhm.
James Ryan is unique.
Sure.
And until and unless James Ryan finds that uniqueness and welcomes it, and nurtures it,
Yeah.
you're not going to be satisfied. You're not going to become who you were meant to be.
Right. Right.
And that's so important.
It's really was another thing that got said in my home group,
Mm-hmm.
those early meetings was there was an anxiety on my part that if I do this stuff, I'm just going to be like a carbon copy of everybody else who's done it. I'm just going
Oh,
to be like,
absolutely. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
what they said was, you're going to be more you than you've ever been before,
Right.
which was kind of shocking, right?
Yeah.
But it made sense. Looking around the room, I could tell these people all shared a common experience, but they were really different people.
Yeah.
Everybody had a different kind of personality and perspective and life interests and stuff. And so the way they diverged was in taking this experience and moving it into their own lives, and it just
Right.
moved in all kinds of different directions
Mm-hmm.
in a way that when we're all getting high together, there's not that much difference. We're just
Right.
kind of a mess, the same kind of mess in
Mm-hmm.
chaos, right? But when we get
Mm-hmm.
recovery together, we move into our uniqueness. You're unique, just like you were saying. We move into
Yes.
that, into who we are
Right.
in a way that we haven't been able to do before, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
And many paths to that.
many,
Many
many paths.
different paths to
Right,
that, but
right.
the trail is quite similar
Yeah,
if it's going
yeah,
to be effective.
yeah. I think that's right.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, beautiful. Keep going.
yeah. Okay. So, I mean, this what we're talking about now is like this pretty intense experience of connecting with something through the 12-step stuff and through the writing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of carries on into my recovery program.
Mm-hmm.
It's radically transformative for me.
Okay.
It was a whole new basis for living that's completely different than it was
Right.
before. I'm at peace on the inside in a way that I've never been before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm able to kind of just like function, like walk down a street without being paranoid and anxious about anything. I can just be
Mm-hmm.
like okay in my skin, and like so this is, I mean, one of the stories that I like to tell about this is the morning after I read my inventory to my sponsor.
Yeah.
I woke up, I made my morning coffee, I sat at my kitchen table, I put the coffee down in front of me, and it kind of steamed for a while, and I watched it, and there was light coming in the window, and there was birds singing outside, and there was kind of a gentle breeze coming through. And I watched the coffee steam, and I looked at the light on the floor, and I listened to the birds, and I smelled the coffee, just sat in my seat. And it was, I don't know how long it was, but it was a while before I noticed that I wasn't thinking anything. I wasn't worried about anything. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
angry at anybody. I wasn't like all up in my head about, oh, these 10 things I have to do today. I wasn't doing any of the stuff that was just natural to me for so long. The
Mm-hmm.
way I was, built as a human, I thought, was to be anxious and restless and crazy. And I wasn't any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
I was just okay.
Yeah.
And that's like a whole new way of being a human that I didn't know how to, like, I don't know how to orient myself anymore. Like, how do you take this into the world? Right. So that's like that level and depth of change just in like the baseline lived experience of a cup of coffee is
Right.
like pretty profound, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that raised some questions for me, which took me into more writing. And the questions were like, what is this stuff? What just happened to me?
Okay.
Where did it come from? And why isn't every 12 stepper like shouting this from the rooftops? How come the movement of 12 steps isn't about this all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those are, I mean, those are largely one of them is kind of a mystical question. The other
Yes.
two are historical questions, right? Where did it come from? And then what happened so that I could be in 12-step meetings for so long without ever hearing about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I started doing some research. So, and I think, in your story, I think this is similar, where we start to look back into the history of this thing, and we end up in the Oxford group, right?
Yeah.
And we end up learning about the kinds of things that they were doing. And
Right.
of course, there's a deeper history to that in sort of Christian mysticism and Christian
Hmm.
theology that goes very far back. And then there's also a history moving forward from that of the 12 steps, starting with this stuff and then kind of growing as a movement into in ways that sort of marginalize this kind of experience, right?
Hmm.
And that in researching that and in writing about that, I created a kind of a timeline for myself, and that sort of became the nucleus for a website that I put up later called stepstudy.org, which
Hmm.
became a focus for my kind of historical thinking and research.
You
Um,
started collecting things,
yeah,
making them available.
that's right. Yeah.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
my answering my own questions and writing about them became a way of doing 12-step work, a way of carrying the message, right? And a lot
Right.
of my writing since then has been kind of wrestling with that question of what's the relationship between my creative weirdness and
Hmm.
being of service to other people.
It's interesting. One of the things I've never seen this spelled out real clearly,
Yeah.
but you've hit another important point
Mm.
in terms of the guidance that one would seek
Yeah.
through the 11th step in the
Yeah.
Oxford group. They didn't have steps, but in that process. But there was the life meaning, the
Mm.
life goal, as
Mm.
well as the daily goal. It was like there were two different things. There's
Mm.
this big picture
Mm-hmm.
to become a giver back of
Mm.
something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very important that you find this is discernment
Mm-hmm.
of James's spirit,
Mm.
and you knew that.
Yeah.
I'm a writer. I'm intelligent. I've got this stuff. What's my path for giving it to others and going deeper in it myself? It's not
Right.
it's not all altruistic.
No, it's
You know,
not. Yeah.
teach
That's the struggle.
teach what you would learn.
Yeah.
Teach
Yeah.
what you would learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're not learning, you're probably not a very good teacher.
No,
So
you
you
run
got
out
to
of things
keep,
to teach. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Or you're
Yeah.
teaching the same damn thing over and over and over again, and you're not connected, and the kids aren't connected,
Yeah. Yeah.
and to me, that's, and we'll get into this a little later, but that's the mechanicalization of 12 step,
Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than it being a discovery and an uncovering and an
Mm.
exciting journey.
Mm.
It becomes trudging
Yes. Right.
and lifeless.
That's right. That's right.
Lifeless.
It can become dead. I don't think
Yeah.
we have time to talk about it today, but I think maybe that's coming up, and we'll talk about what it's
Yes.
like when people do the writing, but sort
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
miss the spirit
Yeah.
of it, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And you've got more of your story to finish up before, but not now. Not
All
now. I
right.
think
Yeah. Yeah.
we've
Yeah.
uh I think this is a good place to stop.
Yeah.
And we've got a nice outline for moving forward. So
Yeah.
I really feel good about this. So yeah, let's put the cap on the bottle here. And we'll go smell the coffee
Yeah.
and chill out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a nice description. And so, guys, we are off and away. James Ryan, author of Recovery Writing. We're going to delve deeper into this in the weeks ahead. And at the rate we're going, we'll probably be here for several months. And that's fine with me.
Me too. Yeah.
You too. Okay. And so, James, I thank you for listening. We'll pick up here next time. And I thank you guys for joining us. I hope you found it helpful. If you want to get in touch with James, drop him a line. Are you okay with that, James? Is that okay?
Yeah. I mean, you can use my email, or
I'll,
you can even go to www.recoverywriting.org, and there's a contact information for me there too.
I will put that in the show notes. And yeah, just drop James a line, and
Yeah.
people appreciate that. So I thank you guys for listening. Again, hope it was helpful. Please come back next week, and till then, God bless, and do keep coming back.